As the Battle of El Alamein moved beyond its opening plan, the northern edge of the battlefield became one of the most important places in the desert. The 9th Australian Division, commanded by Major General Leslie Morshed, held and attacked in the sector nearest the Mediterranean, where the Axis line curved around the coastal road and railway. That road and railway mattered because they were the arteries through which Rommel's army moved men, guns, fuel, and orders behind the front. Montgomery's original break-in had not produced an immediate armored breakthrough, so he turned increasingly to pressure on this coastal flank. The Australian attacks mattered because they were local infantry battles with operational consequences. By threatening the road to the rear, they forced Rommel to look north, commit strength north, and fight where Montgomery wanted him to worry.
If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore.
The northern sector was not open tank country in the romantic desert war sense. It was a crowded, defended belt of mines, posts, ridges, wire, shell holes, and tracks, bounded by the sea on one side and connected to the wider battlefield on the other. The Australians were not being asked simply to march to the coast, as if crossing an empty space. They had to bite into a defensive system held by German and Italian troops who understood that the coast road was vital. If that road was threatened or cut, Axis units in the coastal salient could be isolated or forced to pull back under pressure. In a campaign often remembered through armored maneuver, the route to operational effect now ran through infantry companies fighting over named features and shallow rises. The 9th Australian Division had already earned a reputation in the desert, especially at Tobruk and during the earlier fighting around El Alamein. Its soldiers were experienced, tough, and accustomed to the peculiar demands of desert combat. But experience did not make the task easy. The division was part of the British 8th Army, and its attacks had to fit Montgomery's larger design rather than become a separate Australian battle. That larger design was to keep crumbling the Axis position while preparing a renewed blow elsewhere. Pressure in the north could pull German mobile reserves toward the coast, leaving other parts of the front thinner or less responsive. The Australians, therefore, became a lever, and the coast road became the point at which local combat could influence the entire battle. For Rommel, the northern pressure created a serious dilemma. If he ignored it, the Australians might threaten the coastal route and unhinge a vital part of the Axis line. If he reinforced it, he would spend fuel and move reserves away from other sectors where Montgomery might later strike. This was exactly the kind of decision a commander with limited resources hated to face. Rommel's army was still tactically dangerous, but it did not possess the freedom of earlier desert battles. Air attack, fuel shortage, artillery pressure, and the narrowness of the El Alamein battlefield reduced the speed with which he could correct danger. The Australian push toward the coast did not need to destroy the Axis army by itself. It needed to force Rommel to spend scarce strength in the wrong rhythm. The fighting itself was close and difficult. Australian battalions advanced at night or under artillery support, crossed ground that could disorient even veteran soldiers, and then had to dig in before daylight exposed them to counterattack. A position might be only a low rise, a trench line, or a patch of hard desert near a track, but once taken, it became the center of the world for the men holding it. Enemy artillery and mortars searched the ground. Machine guns and anti-tank weapons covered approaches. Mines and wires slowed movement. The coast was near enough to shape the battle, but not near enough to make the attack simple. Progress came by taking and holding one piece of ground at a time. The role of armor in these northern operations was important, but constrained. Tanks could support attacks, carry infantry part of the way, or threaten enemy positions, but they could not solve the problem alone. In mined and defended ground, tanks were vulnerable to anti-tank guns and could easily lose contact with the infantry they were supposed to help. British Valentine tanks and other armored support had strengths, but once they met mines or gunfire, infantry often had to dismount and continue the fight on foot. This is a crucial armored warfare lesson. Tanks extend infantry power when the ground, timing, and support allow it. When obstacles, darkness, and anti-tank fire break coordination, the tank becomes only one dangerous tool among many, not a magic answer. Artillery gave the Australians much of the protection and weight they needed. Before attacks, guns could pound known positions, cut wire, suppress batteries, and disorganize defenders. During counterattacks, artillery could break up German and Italian concentrations before they reached the forward infantry. But the gunners depended on observation, communication, ammunition, and timing. A barrage that lifted too soon could leave men exposed. A target reported late might already have moved. A forward observer under fire might struggle to describe what he could barely see through dust and smoke. The artillery arm was powerful, but it was not automatic. The battle on the coast showed again that combined arms depended on connection as much as on firepower. The Australians were also fighting against an enemy whose composition deserves care. German troops, including formations such as the 164th Light Division and mobile reserves brought forward from other sectors, were central to the fighting. Italian units held portions of the defensive system and contributed artillery, infantry, and anti-tank fire under extremely difficult conditions. The common memory of El Alamein sometimes turns every hard Axis counterattack into a purely German act, but that distorts the battle. The coastal sector was defended by a mixed Axis army, and its strength lay in how mines, guns, infantry, and mobile units supported one another. The Australians were not pushing against a symbolic enemy. They were attacking a functioning defense that still had depth and will. As the Australian attacks continued, their operational effect became clearer. Rommel began shifting attention and forces toward the northern sector because the threat to the coast road could not be dismissed. This helped Montgomery in two ways. First, it kept the Axis under constant pressure during the period when the initial British plan had bogged down. Second, it encouraged Rommel to believe that the next decisive effort might also come near the coast. That mattered because Montgomery was preparing to renew the breakthrough attempt with Operation Supercharge farther south of the coastal struggle. The Australian pressure was therefore both real and deceptive in its consequences. It was a genuine attempt to hurt the Axis line, and it also helped fix Axis attention where Montgomery wanted it. For the Australian infantry, the strategic purpose did not make the immediate fight any less harsh. Men held forward positions under shell fire, ran ammunition through dangerous routes, and endured counterattacks that came with tanks, infantry, and artillery. Reliefs had to be carried out in darkness, and in a battlefield cut by mines and watched by guns, even moving fresh troops forward could become an ordeal. Wounded men had to be brought back through the same routes. Units that had taken ground might be too tired to hold it well, yet the battle demanded that they hold. The phrase "to the coast" sounds like a clean direction. In practice, it meant repeated attacks through a narrow, lethal landscape where every yard needed protection. These northern battles also help correct a common misunderstanding about armored warfare. The great armored breakthrough at El Alamein would not happen because tanks alone suddenly found a gap. It would happen because infantry pressure, artillery fire, engineering work, deception, air attack, and logistics combined to stretch the Axis defense until it lost coherence. The Australians near the coast were part of that stretching. By drawing reserves and attention northward, they shaped where Rommel could and could not react. They made the enemy spend time, fuel, and men in a sector that seemed immediately dangerous. In mechanized war, pinning an enemy can be as important as breaking him,
because the pinned reserve cannot be everywhere when the final blow lands.
The Australian push toward the coast deserves its place in the Alamein story because it shows how small geography can carry large meaning. A coastal road, a railway, a low rise, and a cluster of defended posts became instruments in a battle for initiative. The 9th Australian Division did not win Alamein alone, and it should not be isolated from the wider 8th Army effort. But its attacks in the north helped transform Montgomery's crumbling phase from passive attrition into active pressure. They forced Rommel to fight for the security of his flank and rear, and they helped prepare the conditions for the later breakthrough. In the history of armored warfare, this is the lesson. Before tanks can run free, infantry may have to make the enemy look the wrong way, fight in the wrong place, and spend the reserves he cannot afford to lose.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.